Hey guys, it's day 2 of Aru Shah and the end of time. It's been raining all day today and it just stopped. So I'm going to do our 20 minutes of reading and then I'm going to take off my pajama pants, throw on some shorts, and I'm going to go for a lap around the block. I hope that you guys are getting out and walking some too and just getting some fresh air. It's good for us. All right. So if you remember where we left off, do you remember Aru's classmates had surprised her with a visit to the museum, and she is going over to show them the haunted lamp. And they say, "So if you light the lamp, the world ends?" asked Burton. Okay, hold on. Let me get my timer set. We're going to do 20. Come on. Okay, 20 minutes. All right. So, if you light the lamp, the world ends? Asked Burton. Aru glanced at the lamp as if it might consider contributing a few words, but it stayed silent, as lamps are wont to do. Yes. Ariel's lip curled. So do it. If you're telling the truth, then do it. If I'm telling the truth, which I am, by the way, then do you have any idea what it could do? Don't try to get out of this. Just light it once. I dare you. Burton held up his phone. Its red light taunted her. Aru swallowed. If her mom were down here, she would drag her away by the ears. But she was upstairs getting ready to go away, yet again. Honestly, if the lamp was so dangerous, then why keep leaving her alone with it? Yeah, Sherilyn was there, but Sherilyn spent most of the time watching Real Housewives of Atlanta. Maybe it wouldn't be a big deal. She could just light a small flame, then blow it out. Or instead, maybe she could break the glass case and act like she'd been cursed. She could start zombie walking. Or Spider-Man crawling. They'd all be scared enough never to talk about what had happened. Please, oh please, I'll never lie again, I promise. She repeated this in her head as she reached for the glass case and lifted it. As soon as the glass was removed, thin red beams of light hit the lamp. If a single strand of hair fell on any of those laser beams, a police car would come rushing to the museum. Poppy, Ariel, and Burton inhaled sharply at the same time. Aru felt smug. See, I told you it was important. She wondered if she could just stop there. Maybe this would be enough. And then Poppy leaned forward. Get it over with, she said. I'm bored. Aru punched in the security code, her birthday, and watched as the red beams disappeared. The air mingled with the scent of the clay daya. It smelled like the inside of a temple, all burnt things and spices. Just tell the truth, Aru, said Ariel. If you do, all you have to do is pay us $10 each and we won't post the video of you getting caught in your own stupid lie. But Aru knew that wouldn't be the end of it. Between a demon that could end the world and a 7th grade girl, Aru, and probably most people, would choose the demon any day. Without the red beams on it, the lamp felt dangerous, as if it had somehow sensed there was one less barrier. Cold stitched up Aru's spine, and her fingers felt numb. The small metal dish in the middle of the lamp looked a lot like an unblinking eye, staring straight at her. I don't have a match, said Aru, taking a step back. I do. Poppy held out a green lighter. I got it from my brother's car. Aru reached for the lighter. She flicked the little metal wheel, and a tiny flame erupted. Her breath caught. Just a quick light. Then she could enact planned melodramatic Aru and get herself out of this mess and never, ever lie again. As she brought the flame closer to the lamp, the Hall of Gods grew dark, as if a switch had turned off all the natural light. Poppy and Ariel moved closer. Burton tried to get closer, too, but Poppy shoved him away. Aru! A voice seemed to call out to her from inside the clay lamp. She almost dropped the lighter, but her fist clenched around it just in time. She couldn't look away from the lamp. It seemed to pull her closer and closer. Aru, Aru, Aru. Just get it over with, Shah, screeched Ariel. The red light on Burton's phone blinked in the corner of her vision. It promised a horrific year. Cafeteria coleslaw in her locker, her mother's face crumpling in disappointment. But maybe if she did this, if by some stroke of luck she managed to trick Ariel and Poppy and Burton, maybe they'd let her sit beside them at lunch. Maybe she wouldn't have to hide behind her stories because her life would finally be enough. So she did it. She brought the flame to the lip of the daya. When her finger brushed the clay, a strange thought burst into Aru's head. She remembered watching a nature documentary about deep-sea creatures, how some of them use bait, like a glowing orb, to attract their prey. The moment a fish dared to swim toward the little light floating in the water, the sea creature would snatch it up with huge gaping jaws. That was how the lamp felt. A small halo of brightness held out by a monster crouching in the shadows. A trick. The moment the flame caught, light exploded behind Aru's eyes. A shadow unfurled from the lamp, its spine arching and reaching. It made a horrible sound. Was that laughter? She couldn't shake the noise from her head. It clung to her thoughts like an oily residue. It was as if all the silence had been scraped off and thrown somewhere else. Aru stumbled back as the shadow thing limped out of the lamp. Panic dug into her bones. She tried to blow out the candle, but the flame didn't budge. Slowly, the shadow grew into a nightmare. It was tall and spidery, horned and fanged and furred. Oh, Aru, 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 what have you done? Oh. All right, chapter 3. Wake up. Aru woke up on the floor. The lights flickered. Something about the room smelled off, like it was rusting. She heaved herself up on her elbows, eyes seeking the lamp. But it was gone. There was no sign that it had ever been there, except for the glass shards on the floor. Aru craned her neck to look behind her. All the statues were facing her. Ice trickled down her spine. Poppy, she called, pushing herself to a stand. Ariel? Burton? That's when she saw them. All three were still huddled together. They looked like a movie that had been paused in the middle of a fight scene. Poppy's hand was on Burton's chest. He was on his heels, tipping backward, about to fall. Ariel's eyes were screwed shut, her mouth open in a silent scream. They were suspended in time. Aru reached out and touched them. Their skin was warm. A pulse leaped at each of their throats, but they didn't move, couldn't move. What had happened? Her gaze snagged on the red light in Burton's pocket, the phone. Maybe she could rewind the recording, but the phone wouldn't budge from his pocket. Everything was frozen, except her. This was a dream. It had to be. She pinched herself. Ow, she said, wincing. She was definitely awake. In a way, so were her classmates. But then, how was everything so still? A creaking sound echoed outside the Hall of the Gods. She stood up straighter. It sounded a lot like a door. Mom, she whispered, running out. Her mother must have heard the noise and come downstairs. She'd know what to do. At the entrance to the Hall of the Gods, Aru saw three things that made no sense. 1. Her mother was frozen too, both feet off the ground as if she'd been caught in mid-jog. Her black hair hadn't even fallen against her back. Her eyes and mouth were open wide with panic. 2. The whole room looked strange and lightless and flat, because nothing had a shadow. 3. The creaking sound hadn't come from the floor, it had come from the elephant. Aru watched, struck somewhere between awe and horror, as the stone elephant that had been standing in the museum for decades suddenly sank to the ground. It lifted its trunk, the same trunk Aru had been using as a backpack hook for years, to its forehead. In one swift, creaking movement, its jaw unhinged. Panicked, Aru ran toward her mom. She reached for her hand, trying to yank her out of the air. "Mom, the elephant is possessed. You really need to wake up." Her mom didn't move. Aru followed her gaze. She'd been staring straight at the Hall of the Gods the moment she was frozen. "Mom?" A voice boomed from the hollow of the elephant, deep and rough and wizened. Aru shrank. "Who has dared to light the lamp?" called the voice. It was dark as a thunderstorm. Aru thought bolts of lightning might shoot out of the elephant's mouth, which under any other circumstance would have been very exciting. "Who has dared to wake the sleeper from his slumber?" Aru shuddered. I did, but I didn't mean to." "You lie, warrior, and for that I am summoned." The sound of flapping wings echoed from the elephant's open mouth. Aru gulped. This was the end. Aru was sure of it. Did birds eat people? It probably depended on the size of the bird, or the size of the person. Not wanting to test the idea, she tried burying her face in her mother's side, but she couldn't fit under her stiff arm. The sounds from the elephant rose steadily. A shadow lengthened on the ground, huge and winged. Whatever had been speaking flew out of the elephant's mouth. It was a pigeon. "Ew!" Aru exclaimed. Her mother had often reminded her that pigeons were rats with wings. "Where is he?" demanded the pigeon. "One of the ancient 5 warriors lit the lamp of Bharata." Aru tilted her head, a question flying out of her before she could stop herself. "Why does your voice sound different?" From inside the elephant, the bird had sounded like it could convince a mountain to turn into a volcano. Now it sounded like her math teacher that at one time he had tried to perform a cappella but had stepped on a Lego piece. For the rest of the day, he'd spoken in an anxious, sulky voice. The pigeon puffed out its chest. "Is there something wrong with how I sound, human girl?" "No, but do I not look like a bird capable of great devastation? I mean, because I shall have you know that whole cities revile me. They say my name like a curse. Is that a good thing?" "It's a powerful thing," sniffed the bird. "And between good and power, I will always choose the latter." "Is that why you're a pigeon? Could a bird narrow its eyes? If not, this one had certainly mastered the illusion. The lamp was lit. The sleeper will start to awaken. It is my sacred duty to guide the Pandava brother who lit it." "Pandava?" Aru repeated. She knew that name. It was the last name of the 5 brothers in the Mahabharata poem. Her mother had said that each of them held great powers and could wield fantastic weapons because they were the sons of gods. Heroes. But what did that have to do with the lamp? Had she hit her head without noticing? She felt around her scalp for a bump. "Yes, Pandava," sneered the pigeon. It puffed out its chest. "Only one of the 5 Pandava brothers could light the lamp. Do you know where he went, human girl?" She lifted her chin. "I lit the lamp." The bird stared, and then stared some more. "Well then, we might as well let the world end." Chapter 4. Ineptitude. Ineptitude. Okay. As you had read somewhere that if you stare at a chimpanzee, it will stare back, smile, and then attack you. She hadn't read anything about what kind of consequences might follow from staring at a pigeon. But she did know that gazes were powerful things. Her mom used to tell her stories of Gandhari, a queen who chose to go through life blindfolded out of empathy for her blind husband. Only once did she take off the blindfold to look at her eldest son. Her stare was so powerful it could have made him invincible if he'd been naked. But no, he was too embarrassed to go without his underwear. He was still super strong, just not as strong as he could have been. Aru sympathized with them. That must have been a horribly awkward moment. And so Aru maintained eye contact with the pigeon, but took one step back. Finally, the bird relented. It hung its head. Its wings drooped. "The last dormant Pandavas were so brilliant," it said, shaking its head. "The last Arjuna was a senator. The last Yudhishthira was a famous judge. The last Bhima was an Olympic athlete. And Nakula and Sahadeva were famous male models who wrote fabulous best-selling self-help books and started the world's first hot yoga studios. And now look at what has become of the line, a girl child of all things. Aru didn't think this was particularly fair. Even famous people had been children at some point. Judges weren't born wearing wigs and carrying gavels. And that led to another question. What was the bird going on about? All those names, Arjuna, Yudhishthira, Bhima, Nakula, and Sahadeva, were the names of the 5 most famous Pandava brothers. There was one more, Karna, the secret Pandava. In the stories, the other Pandavas didn't even know he was their brother until the war had begun. And why did the bird say dormant? Didn't that mean sleeping? The pigeon flopped onto its back and draped one wing dramatically over its beak. So this has to be my fate, it moaned. I used to be going places. Top of my class, you know, it sniffed. Sorry? Oh, that's useful. The pigeon lifted its wing and glared at her. You should have thought about that before you plunged us into this mess. Just look at you. The horror. It covered its face with both wings, muttering to itself, why must every generation have its heroes? Wait, so there's been 5 Pandava brothers in every generation? Asked Aru. Unfortunately, said the bird, throwing off its wings. And I'm one of them? Please don't make me say it again. But how can you be sure? Because you lit the lamp. Aru paused. She had lit the lamp. She had lowered the flame to the metal lip of the object. But it was Poppy's brother's lighter. Did that count? And she was only going to light it for a second, not keep it. Did that make her only a smidge of a hero? I'm fairly positive you are a Pandava, continued the bird. Mostly positive. I am, at least, definitely not going to say no. Otherwise, why would I be here? And on that note, why am I here? What does it mean to wear this wretched body? It stared at the ceiling. Who am I? Never mind, said the bird with a resigned sigh. If you've lit that cursed lamp, the other one will know. Who? We'll just have to go through the door of many. It always knows. Plus, that's a great deal easier than putting something in Google Maps. Most confusing contraption of this century. You're a bird. Shouldn't you know which direction you're going in? I'm not just any bird, you uppity hero. I am, the bird spluttered, then stopped. I guess it doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that we stop this before any true destruction takes place. For the next 9 days, time will freeze wherever the sleeper walks. On the 9th day, the sleeper will reach the Lord of Destruction, and Shiva will perform the dance to end all time. Can't the Lord of Destruction just say, no thanks? You know nothing of the gods, sniffed the pigeon. Aru stopped to consider that. She wasn't shocked by the idea that gods and goddesses existed, only that a person could actually get to know them. They were like the moon, distant enough not to enter her thoughts too often, bright enough to inspire wonder. Aru looked back at her frozen mom and classmates. So they'll just be stuck like that? It's temporary, said the bird, provided you aren't riddled with ineptitude. Ineptitude? Is that French? The bird knocked its head against a wooden banister. The universe has a cruel sense of humor, it moaned. You are one of the few who can make things right again. Then again, you are also the one who started it, and so you and the other must be heroes. That didn't sound very heroic to Aru. It just sounded like an epic mess that required an epic cleanup. Her shoulders drooped. What do you mean, the other? Your sibling, of course. You think you can quest alone? Questing requires families, said the bird. Your brother, or perhaps sister, although I don't think that's ever happened, will be waiting for you. When one Pandava awakens, so too does another, usually the one who is best equipped to deal with the challenge at hand. Until now, the Pandavas have always appeared as fully grown people, not squished bundles of hormones and incompetence. Thanks. Come along, girl child. Who are you? Aru wasn't going to move a step without some kind of verification. But she doubted the bird carried a wallet. The pigeon paused, then said, "Though such an illustrious name should not be uttered by a child, you may call me Subala." It preened. I was. It's a long story. Point is, I'm here to help. Why should I go with you? Ungrateful child, have you no sense of Dharma? This is your task. The freeze will keep spreading like a disease in the sleeper's wake. If he's not stopped by the new moon, your mother will stay that way forever. Is that what you want? Aru's cheeks heated. Of course she didn't want that. But she also felt as if the whole world had spun the wrong way, and she was still finding her balance. Your name is Subala? That's way too many syllables, said Aru, fear snaking into her heart. What if I need help and have to call for you? I could lose an arm or a leg while just trying to say the whole thing. I'm going to call you Sue. Sue is a girl's name. I am a male. Aru, who was often stuck listening to Sherilyn's Johnny Cash playlist, did not agree with Subala. She's going to finish the sentence. Or this paragraph, sorry. No, it's not. Oh, I'm sorry. Aru, who was often stuck listening to Sherilyn's Johnny Cash playlist, did not agree with Subala. No, it's not. There was a boy named Sue. You know, his daddy left home when he was 3. Spare me with the vileness of country music, huffed Subala, flying toward the elephant's mouth. Well, if he wouldn't be called Sue, what about... Boo! Shouted Aru. Subala turned his head, realized what he'd done, and cursed. He perched on top of the elephant's trunk. You may have won this, but I'd wipe that smug grin off your face fairly quickly if I were you. Serious consequences have been triggered by your actions, girl child. As this generation's Pandava, it's now your duty to answer the call to questing. The need hasn't arisen in more than 800 years, but I'm sure your mother told you all that. Boo peered at her. She did tell you, didn't she? Okay. That's our read 20. Guys, we got pretty far this time. We're all the way to page 27. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good evening.